Do you have that option? Excellent.
Yes.
All right, folks. Today, our community of practice is just really, it's about partnering and teaming with Voc Rehab, where we're at, where we've been, and sharing some best practices. So before I get started, we're recording. But for those that don't know me, my name is Jesse Berkey. I'm with the University of Oregon as a technical assistance provider for YTP. I'm out in the field quite a lot, get to visit sites, help you guys have your best programs. So it's part of my role. On the call with us from the university, we also have Mary Jo.
Hi.
And Joyce Douglas. And I believe that's the three of us. After last week, we have a lot of folks out on a vacation today. And then with us from Voc Rehab admin team is Michelle Markle. And then we've invited some targeted Voc Rehab counselors to participate, Brad Haller being one. And we'll go through this. Brenda Maynard's on the call as well. And there, like I mentioned earlier, could be others that join in. So we're doing some Q&A time right now when we get going here. My screens are flipped, so when I'm looking over here, I'm trying to see the presenter mode, but at least the big one, the correct one, is sharing.
There's also the wonderful Kathy Cook.
Kathy Cook, all right. And I don't know if you can hear my dog through my buds, but I hope not. My mother-in-law's in the living room. I'm not sure why she's going nuts. The dog, just to clarify.
Because your mother-in-law is in the living room, that's why.
Well, could be Mary Hanks. Anyways, I apologize for that noise. I'm doing the best I can. So here we have our note. But I want to talk about teaming and what that means in Voc Rehab and within YTP specifically. So if my slide advances, there we go. Successful partnering in YTP teams. You've seen this blue circle perhaps in the past. I'm looking at the participants list. If you've seen this blue circle, put your hand up. Dwayne remembers it. All right, so those hands that are going up, this thing, I resurrected it from 4 years ago. In case you're wondering, it's a little bit dated, but not really, because we talk about team member roles, transition specialists, our Voc Rehab counselors, special education teachers, and our YTP administrators. And we use that term in YTP quite often, teams. And when we say teams, this is who we're referring to. Teams also includes the student, and it can include families, it can be expanded. And I have another slide that walks us through that a little bit more. But this is the one from 4 years ago. And again, I'm seeing some heads nod, but I really like the picture as we revisit what are the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, cooperation, and coordination. And it really takes those 4 words to partner well with our VR agency. As you guys know, they're our funding source, they're our partners, and they work with us in tandem to help students with disabilities move through the VR process into employment, competitive integrated employment. And that includes also through the education components of post-secondary certificate trainings, community college, XYZ program, and go from there. So hopefully no questions so far, but if you guys have any questions, pop them into the chat. We have Joyce Douglas monitoring that. Question I'd like to see you guys use in chat here too, light it up, is teaming. What one word comes to mind when you think about partnering with your VRCs, and VRCs vice versa, with your transition specialists?
We have communication, collaboration.
Well, I'm glad you heard that from 2 slides ago.
Stay connected. Flexibility. Brainstorming. Potential. Success, student first.
Potential.
I know, that was Michelle. You should probably ask her what she meant. Teamwork.
Teamwork. Communication. Student first. I do see that one, Sarah Jordan. Thank you. Part of what I want to do is talk about these words that are coming to mind. We know what communication means in general. It's oftentimes picking up the phone or shooting off an email. It's body language. It's trying to understand each other in more detail. How do we get there? This is important to me and to all of us. This year, I say it has been a rough year. It's been hard to be behind Zoom. It's been hard to see students' faces behind masks, getting to know each other. People have struggled. So teaming, this is what I want to get from today, is that we can identify some best practices and figure out how we can move forward on stable footing as we regroup, get into summer work experiences. Kathy Morris, you wrote trust. That's a beautiful word. And it takes time. Be thinking about that. Be thinking about student first. And what was Michelle's beautiful word? Potential. Be thinking about potential. And again here, partners on our call today, Brad and Melody. Jeanette Walls, are you on the call? Type it in chat or unmute yourself if you are.
I am yes, I'm eating my lunch right now. But I'm here.
Okay, Jeanette and Albany VR / stand-in is Brenda Maynard. And then other teams, I don't know if Michelle's on the call with our beach, the VRC at the beach, or who else is out there. But Brad and Melody were chosen to help highlight and talk to us about some of our next slides. So let's get there. Let's go first in that order. Brad, let's see. How long have you guys worked together?
Been a couple years, I would say about 4. Maybe this is the 5th year, I think.
And just question, we'll just do your partnership first here. How frequently do you guys meet together, either informally or formally?
Pretty often. And because of COVID, it's a little less than we would otherwise, obviously. Prior to COVID, it was a lot more in the schools and a lot more face-to-face, but we're still doing that, of course.
We're getting there. And for bonus points here, can you name your partner's favorite drink at work or after work?
She always brings their giant thing of water to the office, so I would say water.
Water. Do you agree, Melody?
Yes, it's Melanie, but I like Melody.
I'm sorry.
That's totally fine. It's either way. I get called Melody a lot.
I messed up.
No
Okay.
worries. No, I agree with him. Due to the fires and stuff also, previously Brad and I were able to share a office. Graciously, they shared an office with me. So not only was he able to collaborate in the schools and be on campus, we are able to be able to, like, we are literally 6 feet apart, so we're able to collaborate and talk about things. And so that was very, very helpful. And I would just have to give props to Brad too, because he's really helped me through this journey of learning. And I had 3 different, I didn't have the 4 C's, but I would have to say with Brad, it's number 1, I did put communication. flexibility, grace, understanding with the students' parents. And then I put focus and meaning, like he's very focused with student driven and individualizing plans, because each of our students are coming to us with such different ideas. So Brad does such a great job with that, being flexible and understanding. So it's really great collaboration working with him.
Okay, well, good job drinking your water. And
I know,
thank you for sharing. Can you answer what his favorite drink is?
You know, it's funny as I would have to say we both, he has this old plastic, I should get him a new one, but it's an old plastic water bottle that he drinks out of. Yes, it has the lid. I always want to get him a different lid because it kind of flops around and stuff, but and I would have to say he's a snacker. He does enjoy snacks, so he loves to snack, I noticed.
Well, it may not seem like it, but that's a really important question. If you can name the beverage that your VRC likes, that means you're hanging out together. You know each other, you trust each other, you've got some rapport down. So that's where that came from. Thank you, folks. Brenda, I know you're in the room and you're standing in for Jordan Meekins a little bit, who was unable to participate. And Jeanette is from Lebanon High School. I know she's eating her lunch, so I'm sorry, Jeanette, if I'm calling on you right now and you need to be chewing or something. But if you guys could unmute and help talk about this slide with me just a little bit. Intakes, eligibility, IPE dates, employment data. That's nothing new. It's information that we share and we need to collaborate and coordinate on between VR partners and transition specialists. When Jeanette and I talked a couple of weeks ago about this, she had really good things to say about getting buy-in and having work-ready students, and students also available to meet with their counselor. But Jeanette, I'd like you to talk on that a little bit. How do you partner with your VR counselor to make sure that when they visit your school, you guys are ready to meet?
So we have a permanent date. It's always the first Monday of each month that Jordan and I usually do a Zoom or a phone call, and he'll tell me who we want to talk to, or if I have an intake, or, you know, because we like to do the check-in, but not necessarily, Jordan doesn't need to talk to every single one of my kids that week. So I line it up the week. Then the following week, he comes in personally to the school, and then we do a check-in with him, with the students.
So what I think I heard you say is he gives you a list of who he would like to see, and you help work hard to make sure that the kid is there.
Yes.
So I hear a lot of teaming in that. I hear a lot of being proactive.
It
And
sounds
I
like
hear that-
also prepping for the referral intakes too.
Yeah.
For those meetings.
And what about, Brenda, you can stay on for this one, working with families together, and maybe Brad wants to chime in because I heard good things said there as well. How do we make sure the student's ready for their meeting with VR?
A lot of it is chasing down things. Documentation sometimes is difficult for the families or the students. Having a good special ed case manager that can connect you with the resources they already have available, or give you some information about what might work best for different families as far as like meeting times or jumping into the IEP to meet them for the first time.
Oops, I changed my slide. Jumping into the IEP for the first time.
To meet them the first time.
As a VRC, sometimes when you're in the schools, you get the privilege of saying, hello, family. Here's some reality about working with youth, or youth working with our adult-based agency program. And that can be overwhelming sometimes for school staff to lay it out and timeline it. How do you do that in a positive manner that still leaves families engaged and wanting to connect?
I don't think we ever burst anyone's bubble, or we try not to. So they can come in with whatever ideas they want, and we do our best to use motivational interviewing strategies and follow them where they're going. So if they aren't necessarily work ready, that doesn't mean we're shutting them down. We're just going to talk about what steps or what things we would be looking for to know they're work ready, and that we'd put back on the family and potentially the school, to make the decision about when that might be, since it probably could potentially not be that moment, right? So that you're not like saying, oh no, you don't know what you're saying, your kid's not work ready and you guys need some more time. You're just giving them the information and allowing them to kind of see the bigger picture of what we're offering and how that's going to coordinate with where the student is at that time.
Thank you. I think that's really well said, and it's a partnership, and that's what sometimes is missing in an IEP meeting, or at the end of the IEP meeting, where the student knows they want to go to Voc Rehab or believes they want to go to Voc Rehab, and maybe there's unrealistic expectations, and sometimes the special ed teacher partner has a difficulty saying, I think you'll need to do X, Y, and Z services first, which could include making sure that you're signing up with the county brokerage or DD services, making sure that this adult agency in the community exists before you're going to Voc Rehab. And families aren't necessarily always ready to hear that from school staff. And sometimes school staff don't always say what needs to be said. So I know that there's a partnership where the Voc Rehab counselor educates, coordinates, and helps walk that out with students. And then you might not do the intake that day, but you may do an intake 6 months later, and that's okay. But how do we keep that on a positive manner? And I think you outlined it very well, Brenda. You don't shoot them down, you don't say no, and there's no wrong door to VR. So it's an important component. And when you have that trust and you have that relationship, there can be compromise and hard conversations. And I think that we can get there. So there's a lot of new staff on this call today. I'm looking across the faces that I see on my screen, at least. And I'm defining new as anybody within the last biennium when I say this. So Sarah, Lisa, those are two faces I see right now. I know you have questions on how could I team better with my VR partners? And in a couple minutes here, we're going to give you the chance to open it up, ask the questions, put it in the chat, and we're going to hear from Voc Rehab staff on their perspectives. So the next slide, some best practices as I've seen them. You guys named it, how do you spend time together? If you know knowing their favorite drink, you're buying your counselor a mocha once in a while, or sometimes it's vice versa. The counselor meets you at a coffee shop and buys you a drink. It's just that connecting and that being together, I think, is most important as we look at ways to do that safely as we, come out of the pandemic or wherever that takes us. Summer work experience. That's another fun area. It's how do we connect with VR during the time when most students are available to work? There's all kinds of events that happen. There used to be camps and summer work opportunities, paid employment, internships. Some school districts have hired and used their dollars to pay student wages for community jobs. Jeanette helped set that up in Lebanon in the past. I think at a donut shop and a welding shop and somewhere else. So there's that. And then there's the best practices of PSO engagement. What happens when a student's 1 year out and you find out they want to be engaged? Is your VR partner on board and with you right after you've made that call to say, hey, let's re-engage this kid. We just found out he was sitting on the couch for the last 9 months and he now wants a job. Perhaps they were even enrolled in VR and just kind of sitting there and you were sending out case notes every 3 months saying, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. And all of a sudden the light bulb clicks when you make those PSO calls. Are you partnering together? It's fun to watch that happen, and we learn about it quite frequently. So here's the next slide asks for those questions I talked about. So be ready, folks. But for the teams, what's working, those two that were on the call? And how is a VR present in your local school district? Jeanette mentioned she queues up Jordan, they make a list of kids, then he comes out. But are you meeting in person at your schools? Is it already happening? And do you have a dedicated space? That's part of the best practice. When COVID came along, every little office got hijacked, if you will, even the broom closet. And VR counselors were displaced. They used to have a 10 by 12 area where they could meet confidentially with the door shut and be with the students one-on-one or two-on-one or however it needed to be. That went away. Are we getting back to this space in the school for your VR partner? That's a question. I'm hoping that you do have that dedicated space and we can find that, and that you can work with your TAPs to contact your administrators if you don't have that dedicated space, because we can emphasize how and why it is so important. But it
We
sounded
do.
like,
At our,
sounds like
we
Brad has
still
it.
have our same offices and everything.
Jeanette never lost it. Kudos to you. That's exciting.
I actually trying to
started-
gain some room.
I started as a VRC during the pandemic, but I was YTP for 8 years before. But the spaces that we have are dedicated to us during that time, even if we have to reserve them through like the special ed secretary at the specific schools, because I go to 7 different schools through the month and I do about 3 hours at a school. So
Thank you.
and I was just telling Jesse that when Kim Murphy and I were at Corvallis High School the last time, because that space is dedicated to us during that time period, both students and staff realized that. And even after our pandemic year, they came to us and were talking about a couple students on radar for next school year. And then the principal brought a student who had filled out an intake questionnaire and said, oh no, you were right. These girls are here during this time. And so it worked out really nicely that we're in that space like almost every time that we're scheduled to be there, because clearly if people want to look for us, they're starting to learn where to go. So
That's a really neat example, Brenda. Thank you. And Becky, are you on the call today? Out of Salem? You
am.
are. Hi, thank you for speaking up. One thing that came to mind was, about 2 months ago, you had a dedicated meeting with your SPED department staff.
I did. That was really beneficial. We met after school. So here that was 3:30. Almost all of the case managers attended. Our vice principal attended. Our speech language pathologist was also in attendance. And my supervisor, Jared Myers, as well as 2 of the guidance counselors. So, and of course, Jesse, you were able to come and kind of be the guest speaker as well. It really has paid a lot of dividends. Just people are more familiar with the youth transition program. I think also my philosophy about the youth transition program, I really feel that I can provide pre-employment transition services to everyone in the building. And so I think that opened up some just brainstorming sessions for staff. So I will always be very appreciative that you were able to come. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that. And I did very much enjoy being there. That's part of my role. Oftentimes those meetings happen in August or September with PD days right before school opens up, or the whole SPED department teams together like that. But we were missing your key VR partner there. And I remember that the VRC was not present.
That is correct. I would have to think back. With COVID, I'm not sure if kind of where we were as far as having guests in the building at that time. So I'd have to kind of think back as to where we were kind of with COVID policies then. But although you were here, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that was early May and or maybe late April. It was a really neat meeting with a dedicated space in your room, and everybody came to learn about YTP. If the VR partner had been there, I think we could have had more question and answer around referrals. How do I access the front door? What does an eligibility look like? And where is your office at, so that I can send students there? Those types of nitty gritty details. So if you have that type of a meeting, do reach out to VR, try to plan it well in advance. I know a lot of VRCs probably are going to ask for 2 months notice, if you can allow for that. But
Yeah, no, great suggestion. And I definitely, if we were to do it over again, we would be able to include more people. And I think as well, I might have tried to identify some key, we call them IAs, instructional assistants. I often refer to them as job coaches because of my time at the community transition program. But they're also staff who are very, very familiar with students in the building. So I think that would be another key partner to include. But
yeah, thank you. We talked about some of these best practices. I know there's more. You guys could feel free to discuss them as you see them. But let's take a few minutes. We've got at least 10 minutes for some Q&A here. What didn't we address that you guys from the field are curious about? What's working? What's a best practice? What might be a barrier that some sites have overcame that they could share?
You do the regional meetings in your guys' area too, right? The YTP regional.
There's a YTP Fall Regional as a general training event, but there's a monthly meeting with counties is how I look at it. I try to run those with the Salem area, Marion and Polk, and Clackamas County. I know Mary Jo tries to do one of those meetings somewhere.
I know that for our Lynn Benton, Lincoln County area, which is pretty large, I might say, since our Benton County schools are 7 and there's the other 2 counties, but it is extremely helpful to get us all together as a group. We can even get administrators there a lot, like VR admin, VR counselors, as many can come. Pretty much every YTP specialist is there, and we've been back to in-person. And even the 10, 15 minutes after, like everything that happens within or during that time seems to be pretty valuable for team building and keeping, house a little bit and helping people problem solve and bringing in new resources and things like that.
Yeah. So again, the meeting that you're referring to, Brenda, we call those our consortia meetings. Many areas around the state have them. I believe, well, Joyce obviously with the Lynn Benton Lincoln, and then Mary Jo I know has one.
And we're establishing one with Harney and Grant and Malheur, working on it for next school year.
Yeah. I think one thing that's running through my mind right now, Jesse, I don't know how it fits under teaming. And it's especially evident when new teams are coming together and forming, where it's like school expectations are this.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be referring all of my students to VR. Oh no, it's the end of the year. I forgot to. Now I have 45 referrals. I'm gonna turn into VR, right? So that's one perspective. That's the truth. And like we all get better, but that stuff happens sometimes. And then there's VR, a system that isn't built on the same like urgencies and timelines. And like willing, wanting, welcoming, believing everybody can work, but also wanting to set people up for success so they have what they need. Maybe it's somebody who needs a job coach and you're furiously trying to find a job coach. So I say all of these things to say it isn't just the referral or the application or the receipt. It's all of the communication that weaves in and out of that to problem solve through something like that. So, you know, if you have good, trusting, open communication, oh no, there's 40 kids I forgot to refer. Can we pace that out over the next several months? Are any of them going to need XYZ services? Let's prioritize those. Like, it's just that kind of stuff that's not written down anywhere. I mean, kind of in our YTP manual, if anywhere it's written down, but it's kind of like those unwritten things that I think is just the most, when I talk about potential, it's the potential to make our own lives easier and our own jobs easier and more rewarding because we see the successes vet out student by student. Yeah.
There it is. Potential. I knew you were going to tie it in somehow to where it fit. I love it, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Jesse, I was going to say with me being new, I know none of the things and I'm learning all of them, but I can say that the best way that I can see is there's a different YTP specialist at our school that did an amazing job. I'm a completely different person. I'm super high energy. I'm super positive. And what I've noticed is I spend months with the students developing a really good relationship and talking up my VRC before I ever even introduce that fact. So that way they don't get scared off by it or they don't get freaked out by it. I think that's been really, really helpful because I think that sometimes when you think about referring to a state agency, some families kind of get nervous about it. So getting them that buy-in and talking about how great the person is, or even just setting up a meeting to introduce them to my VRCs that I have, like Erin's my main one, but just letting them even talk to them before we even talk about doing the intake, because I think that's been more successful. I've had several intakes this year. With it being my first year, I didn't think I would, but I'm like, I have an IEP at this and that'll be my 25th student. So I think that relationship is really important.
Sarah Jordan, you said 20.
I agree with that. Like in our rural, especially our rural areas, more so than probably even our more bigger areas, because there is a stigma to people who work for the state, and we do walk in with the state of Oregon badge on, and they think of us as those people sometimes. And it, because I was YTP, it might be easier for me because the kids have seen me before. But for the ones that don't, you don't want to have these families be like, no, we're not doing that. And then 6 months down the road, the kid's 18 and wants to sign up on their own. Then you have this, so it does help if you need to introduce them to who we are and kind of what we do before we walk in the first time, because that does make it a little bit harder for us on our end.
There are a couple.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no worries. There's just a couple things in the chat, but you can speak first.
Oh, I just wanted to add another shout out to Brad. Is he does try and attend IEPs when able to, and that is very helpful because then he's already one step ahead. He's interacting with the teachers already and the students, and so he's already getting this great information. Please sit down. This great information. So that's really helpful for him to be at those meetings.
Thank you, Melanie, for that comment. To piggyback off of that, and I know there's a question in chat, we'll jump to that next, Joyce. Brad, I'm curious, how do you get invited to those IEP meetings? And how do you know which ones to attend? Because the teacher partner we had in those 4 roles earlier at the beginning of this will invite you to every IEP possible. And your time would say, I can't attend them all as much as I wish I could, most likely. So how do you guys prioritize which ones to attend?
Well, and yeah, there was a time where they were trying to invite me to like 200, I remember, which is like, I can do maybe 20. But yeah, it does happen sometimes, and it's either a whole bunch or not enough, it seems like. I try to do the ones, especially if somebody's a senior and leaving school and wants to work, those seem the most important. A lot of it is, I know YTP and the teacher are talking a lot more than I am with the teacher. So a lot of times YTP can kind of screen in or out. I hate to use screening term, that's wrong, but more about, well, is this an appropriate one or not right now? Every once in a while, there'll be somebody who's younger who, yeah, Brad, we really want you to go this one. It's like, okay, and so I try to do as many as possible as opposed from not. A lot of it too, I mean, if it's a month out, I can probably guarantee I'll be there. I mean, if it's in a week, I probably can't, because of time wise and stuff, but I think it just kind of flows eventually. I mean, at first, every time there's a new teacher, suddenly they slam all these and everything. And then once they kind of get the rhythm, oh, okay, we don't need to go to everything. I think then it works out a lot smoother, and I don't feel bad saying no to, well, I'm not going to them all. But it does seem to kind of flow pretty well.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Yeah, and we acknowledge, I mean, again, coming out of COVID, there's a lot of newness in this circumstance and environment with jobs, new VRCs, new transition specialists, new teachers, new admins. People have figured out they love their job, they want to stay, or they may have made a vocational error, as some others might say. But really, newness is never going to go away. So how do we roll with it? How do we overcome it and continue to partner well as change happens? It's going to be inevitable. So, Joyce?
Okay, we have Kathy Morris said that in 7 years at Reynolds, she's had 4 VRCs. Having trust, patience, communication is the key. And then Lisa brought up an issue of it would be helpful to have some consistency as far as paperwork. As someone fairly new, I only work with 2 different VRCs, and there's a difference there, and coworkers have many VRCs. And they have different paperwork even still. It makes it confusing, at least in the learning phase. We have a few things that might help with that, as we have the VR YTP notebook, which was created as a collaboration with transition specialists and VRCs. And that's not a list of what you need to do, it's more of suggestions. But at least my observation is every school is different in the state. Many VR branches are different, and that goes into that communication and trust and working up your system, because you're going to have consistency with that VRC once you figure out what they need, and hopefully that will be helpful. Anyone else got ideas on that?
So to the new person, I'm just going to apologize in advance, because I believe I come from, well, I've been with VR for 9 years, I think. And before that, I was with child welfare. So I went from a very black and white system to a not very black and white system. And so I had a really large learning gap there. And I think I'm kind of getting it. But I've also realized that we're all very different. And so that communication piece of talking with them one-on-one and getting to know both your VRCs is just going to be, it's just going to be a trial and error period. And I wish you the best. And I think that the best thing to do is just keep at it and keep talking and keep communicating, keep learning how to work with them and together. And that's important. And you might hit some bumps along the way, but you'll end up in a good spot with somebody with that communication piece.
Yeah, I think, Jesse, can you share that, maybe the, where that is on the website? And I want people to remember that on there is what, if you go through that, what's on the YTP VR notebook and do all of those things and have those forms filled out, you should be there. That was okayed by the executive team with VR. That's what they want. And that was agreed on for the whole state. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle. And then they, you may have a VRC that wants a little bit more of something else or needs something, but this is your guideline right here with the VR YTP notebook. Everything's downloadable, fillable, all those things. So, it could possibly be that VRCs are being hired at a rate that they're not getting this training on the YTP portion of it. So that may fall on you, unfortunately, that you might say, this is what we've done in the past. This is where it is on the website, and this is what we follow. And this is what I do. Everything to get a student
Yeah.
ready for a VR intake. And that's what we want the students to be ready for the VR intake, for you to have all that paperwork, documentation, all those things that are necessary. And it outlines it really well on this page.
Is it showing now?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
It should be. Yes.
So I work with a school that's not YTP also, and I actually refer them to this when they're gonna get paperwork ready or refer parents to like explore around what VR does, because it is a really good kind of overview of the process without like, having to get into the state site and try to navigate it.
Good. Thanks, Brenda. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Another
makes-
idea, if say you're brand new and you're working out that relationship with either your VRC or your transition specialist, I've had people where I meet with the VRC and the transition specialist, and I'm just kind of a fly in the room, fly on the wall, whatever, and just sit back and listen. And I'm able to fill in some of those gaps where maybe the transition specialist doesn't know VR language or vice versa, to help guide them in asking questions to make sure there's not miscommunications or things that are missed in that. So that might be a suggestion if you're struggling to communicate, because both people speak different languages for sure.
One thing that I think is really important too, this makes me think of, is just, again, this is not written anywhere, but I think it's a best practice that transition specialists and VRC are on the same page about eligibility before the application happens, because the worst case scenario is you go through this and then a student ends up not eligible for VR because of lack of evidence, and then they're not eligible for anything. They're not even eligible for pre-ETs or anything like that. So like, I'm playing it out all the way to the end because sometimes it does happen, but we just don't want that to happen. So it's great for the VRC and the transition specialists to always be checking in. And then if the VRC is like, I don't have enough yet, then you're like, what other evidence do you need? Because I've been working with this individual for 4 years and I know they're going to need VR, so I think that's a really common conversation that happens between teams, and it's important. Despite all the paperwork and formal processes, just continue to communicate about that so the VRC can say like, yeah, this is looking like I'm going to have everything that I need. And for the VRC to be really honest about like, I don't have enough. This is not going to be enough. Please, not quite yet. Let's make sure and set the student up for success. They can keep getting pre-ETs in the meantime. Please go back and get me this info, that kind of thing. I don't know if teams want to comment on that or not, but that's something that I see that comes up quite a bit. More than I would like it to. What happened if graduation happens in that process, Lisa? You can keep work. So YTP doesn't restrict you from working with a student after they graduate because it is a VR service. So if you're already working with a student, you want to aim for that. There's even like some language in the Code of Federal Regulation that you want to try and have it done, but it doesn't mean you cut a student off as they graduate, because VR is an adult service. So we want to keep working on it until they get what they need and get hooked up with the service that they need.
And that kind of leads into another thing is, if you have a student who signs up for VR and they've graduated and you're a transition specialist, you can keep working with that student because you work with their YTP all the way until you exit them, and then for that whole year follow-up. So even if they graduated, you're still supporting them and all of that.
Brenda, that's a myth buster there. Yeah, if a student is actually formally found not eligible for VR, then they are no longer eligible for pre-employment transition service pre-ET. Yeah.
Well, and
oh, sorry, now I'm reading this.
Yeah, there's a
Good.
lot of nuance wrapped up in that one, Brenda. And even though somebody may have an SLD, a specific learning disability, that they may be eligible for VR. So that goes to conversations with VR and say, what would you need to identify and make this person eligible? Because if you have an SLD and it's a true SLD, there's a psychological definition or a DSM based type definition behind it that says maybe this student is not reading above a 5th grade reading level, or maybe their math is not above a 3rd grade reading level or math level, but their other levels might be at 8th grade or beyond. So it may appear on paper that the individual doesn't need help, but maybe their job and their want, and they're enrolled in a training program, certificate program of some course that would require that they have some kind of interventions behind it, whether it's really intensive tutoring to make sure you're passing a test or some other form. And if you find that to be true, then you're probably eligible for VR. So I guess my point is, in reading this, I would want to ensure that, one, there is no wrong door to VR, and B, that VR holds the ultimate decision to say, yes, you're eligible, or no, you're not, but here's why.
Hey, Michelle or Garrett, could one of you guys talk a little bit about if there's not enough documentation for the student in their file or doctor information, how VR can assess the students themselves, can get someone to assess the students? Because I know there's been twice where I've gotten students accepted by VR when they've assessed them themselves, gotten a doctor to assess them.
Yes, and I see Kathy saying 3 different times. Yeah, it's just VR can require or entertain additional assessments if the school file doesn't hold enough information. And I think that's like I guess my cautionary thing there is, like, we really want to look deep in the school file, because students are assessed and assessed and assessed and assessed, right? But when that doesn't exist, then VR can pay for assessment by a qualified assessor to do academic testing or psychological testing, or can do required doctors visits and then do releases of information and share any of our VRCs online here. I don't know if you want to talk to when you would do that and when it makes sense and when it doesn't to you.
So typically for YTP students, if the actual testing from the psychologist, letters after the name, is longer than 2 years old, then I'm going to order my own testing, because the eligibility wouldn't stand up because the testing's too old for most of these kids. A lot of times they get reevaluated without new testing, and they do some, have behavioralists come in and stuff, but they may not have the same credentials. And we often, if the school continues to keep dedicated space, have our evaluator go to the school and do it on site. Although we've had some issues in some of our smaller schools with the space being used and our psychologists being kind of not super happy about it. So they said, we're not going to continue to go there if this happens again. But it definitely is a great service that we have when we just are right there, but don't necessarily have either quite enough or enough work-related functional limitations, because they've been in the school system doing what the school does for services, which is different. And so it is not uncommon in our area to have our YTP students with an updated evaluation.
Thank you, Brenda. And it also partly is diagnosis specific, right? You might be referring to a specific learning disability in that capacity that's longer than 2 years old. But a student with a brain injury or an orthopedic impairment, something like that, it's
Down
going to
syndrome,
continue.
ID.
So it's case by case basis, and you of course staff it out. I'm looking at the chat, and I know Joyce, you are too. Gail had a question there, and so does Lisa, I think, around pre-eds. The long and short, I believe, is pre-eds end when the student is no longer a student. Graduation happens, regular diploma, they're not a student tomorrow. Now what? Don't record any more pre-eds on the individual unless you know that they're enrolled in community college starting in the fall or some post-certificate training, post-secondary certificate training, then pre-eds could continue. But YTP services don't have to end. You've documented pre-eds on them during the high school status or their student status. And this is the answer that I think Lisa's looking for. They're still YTP or YTP potential. You're still going to refer them to VR in July or August. So keep that relationship going. There's just nothing to document in the pre-eds database side of things. Does that help clarify that, Lisa? Okay. And what was the next one, Joyce?
Okay, yep, we got that one. Okay. Kathy Morris says most of mine are SLD but qualify for VR. Also remember that a student may have a medical diagnosis but are not on an IEP or 504. VR can obtain medical records to qualify them.
Yeah.
And oh, go.
That's very true. An example I use there, it's just sometimes maybe ADD or ADHD. Perhaps the student takes meds at 7:30 in the morning right before school starts. They last through till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And most people in the district have no idea that the student has that diagnosis. But anyways, go ahead. What if a senior filled out YTP paperwork and is in the process of referral to VR? Still deliver pre-eds? I think, again, it depends on the graduation process. And you deliver what looks like pre-eds. You may not call them pre-eds if they're no longer a student.
Yeah, remember before pre-eds were a documented thing, they were just basically what you do with a student to get them ready for VR application and for finding a job. So yeah, even if you're not checking those little boxes, you're still working with the student.
Yeah, good question. Okay, folks, it's 2:55 now. We're just about to the end of this, but I don't know if there's any more burning questions or something that you really have to ask
Let's
myself,
answer this one
ask
here.
Joyce.
I think this is a good one. What if they were a senior? They filled out YTP paperwork. Again, you've really got to look at, the word is student. Will they be a student in the fall or not? If they're going to be a student in the fall, you continue to document pre-eds. If they aren't registered or anything, they've graduated from high school and they're just out there and all they want to do is work and have no dreams of going to college or aren't registered for college right away, you stop documenting pre-eds.
Any more burning questions? I see one hand up from Kathy Cook.
I knew Kathy was going to say something.
I know, I just can't help myself.
Hey.
So this is the question about finding them eligible, which with COVID policy updates all the time, we've been getting tons of them and reading through. I'm going to read something that I can't give you in writing, but for learning disabilities, documentation and diagnosis from a licensed psychiatrist or psychologist, period. The second sentence says, eligibility for special education services in Oregon based upon impairment. So Then it goes on, it should be a period, but it says or diagnosis from a licensed psychiatrist. So if you have an eligibility for special education in Oregon based on the impairment, which a lot of times it does not state in the IEP, but I ask for the reports that do find them eligible for special education services. In those reports, it gives us much more detailed information for where their impairments lie. And if it is an impairment to employment, they should qualify for VR services. Does that make sense? It's a lot of technical language, different, because every eligibility, we look at records from licensed psychologist. However, in special education services and in TBI, however, I would still want an updated report for a TBI person. Definitely, because there's different issues. But we can go, but not usually just on the team agrees. We need to find the reports and the information of the assessments that are taken into account for that 3-year evaluation. I hope that helps everybody. I've been going around and round and round on this so that it's clear, so it's a little bit more able to go through all of VR to understand it the same way, because just because you have a disability, it doesn't mean that you're going to get VR services. It needs to be an impairment to employment.
Yes, Kathy, that all makes sense. I think I heard two basic things to try to summarize. One, transition specialists can go to the cumulative file, right? That document housed, it's maybe this thick for some students. Maybe it's in the SPED department, maybe it's at the district office, but you find the records from 8 years ago and you say, here it is. And then B, you have a diagnosis at least. You may need an updated status of some kind. You may need a psychologist to review it and say, I affirm that this diagnosis still exists. That might be a feasible solution as well. So transition specialists, take that for what it's worth, dig into the files deeper, try to get permissions to view those files. A lot of times that's where part of the barrier is between YTP transition specialist staff and school district staff. They say, no, you're not in the office enough. And that might be ESD specific, for example. But work with your admins, again, part of the team, to help coordinate and arrange for the delivery of services, and we'll get there. So.
And I've had in the 4 years that I've been here, I've had 4 IT specialists in Grant County, and I go over it with them. I know the teachers, I know the SPED ed directors. We're able to get that within hours. It's not days or weeks. It can happen rather quickly. We can get an answer. And to this point, I have never found someone not eligible. So it's very, we're a rural area. We, don't have the closest diagnostician or psychologist, psychiatrist is 125 miles away. Those take longer, and even virtually, things like that. But we can, the kiddos, the people, that they're going to struggle if they don't have services. We want to help them and find them eligible. So just getting into those records and working with your VRC and just communicating with them is probably the best bet.
All right. Thank you again, Kathy. And for everybody on the call, thank you for joining us, participating, having a dialogue and discussion with us. Brad and Melanie, thank you. Jeanette and Brenda, thank you. Anything else from YTP for the good of the order? I don't think we have any announcements coming up.
And I don't think we're having a COP in July, are we, Jesse?
I don't know, Mary Jo. I should, but I don't know. We didn't meet today to discuss it. Our team is kind of fractured just due to vacations and summer. And you guys see that on the call. We're down to 60. We're normally at 90. So we missed those that couldn't be here. Hopefully you found this recording engaging and enlightening somehow, that it helps. But we're here for you. Reach out to your TAPs, especially if you have questions around pre-eds and any of the follow-up information from Summer Academy from last week. We can get into the weeds on, yes, you're a student, no, you're not. Yes, you are if you're in an 18 to 21 program, but that's typically an 18 to 21 program. You're still enrolled, you're still receiving services, so you're still eligible, Gail. Otherwise, we will see you around. Please do reach out, and thank you for being here. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy summer, if it ever comes.